The grand arena on Talaran was unlike anything Captain Ronan Holt had ever seen. It was a colossal structure that stretched far into the sky, its walls alive with glowing lights and hums of alien technology. Thousands of spectators filled the stands, their alien forms a blur of colors and shades. This was the heart of the galaxy, the place where warriors from all across the stars came to fight for honor, glory, and sometimes their very lives. Ronan stood at the entrance, staring out into the massive arena. The ground below him was cracked and scorched from countless battles, a true testament to the brutal nature of this place. His heart raced. He wasn't just here to fight for himself. He was here to represent humanity, Earth's first champion, standing on an alien world, ready to prove that humans were not weak, not inferior. The crowd fell silent as Ronan stepped into the arena, his heavy suit of armor clicking with each step. It wasn't just any armor. It was a masterpiece of Earth's finest technology, lightweight but durable, designed to enhance strength, speed, and protection. Despite the confidence he felt in the suit, there was something unsettling about the situation. Alien eyes were upon him, each one a reminder that he was an outsider, a species they thought of as primitive. At the far side of the arena, Princess Arlena of Sci-Fi stood tall and regal, her alien features striking and her posture perfect. She was the jewel of the Sci-Fi Empire, a warrior in her own right, and the one who would judge the human champion. Her eyes locked onto Ronan as he approached, and a faint smirk played on her lips. "Well, well," she said with a voice that carried across the arena. "Earth sends its greatest warrior, wrapped in metal, like a coward. I was hoping for something more impressive." Ronan didn't flinch. He knew that her people valued strength and raw power, not the technology that made Earth's warriors dangerous. But that didn't matter to him. He wasn't here to prove himself to one person. He was here for Earth, for humanity. "I'm here to fight, not to impress," Ronan replied, his voice steady and firm. The crowd erupted in laughter at the back and forth, but Ronan stood still, ignoring them. His focus was on the princess, the real challenge ahead. "You're a long way from home, human," Sarlena taunted, stepping forward, her sharp alien features showing amusement. "I'll make this quick. It won't be much of a fight after all." Ronan's eyes narrowed as he activated his armor systems, feeling the power surge through him. But deep down, he knew that this fight was more than just physical. It was about proving to the galaxy that humans could stand tall, even without the support of their advanced technology. That even without their armor, they had something that made them truly unique. The gate opposite him opened, and out stepped Ronan's first opponent, a hulking alien warrior, a brute called Zarin the Savage, known for his vicious strength and nearly unstoppable attacks. He was everything Sarlena had expected, wild, untamed, and fiercely powerful. Ronan cracked his knuckles inside his armored gloves, preparing for the fight ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but one thing was for sure: he wasn't about to back down. And maybe, just maybe, he could show Sarlena something she'd never seen before. The battle began. The crowd roared as the fight began. Ronan stood tall, his eyes locked on Zarin the Savage, the massive alien warrior who stood opposite him in the arena. Zarin's muscles bulged under his thick, rough skin, and his alien eyes glinted with malice. Ronan could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. This wasn't just another fight. It was his chance to prove humanity's worth. Zarin wasted no time. With a roar, he charged forward, the ground shaking beneath his feet with each massive step. His claws were sharp and glistened under the arena lights, and Ronan could see the strength in his every movement. This was no ordinary fighter. The alien was a beast in every sense of the word. Ronan didn't flinch. His suit of armor hummed softly as he adjusted his stance. He had trained for this. He had trained for worse. His armor may have been built for power, but he was no stranger to agility. With a quick twist, Ronan dodged to the side as Zarin's claw came down like a hammer, missing him by inches. The crowd gasped as Ronan smoothly rolled to his feet, ready for the next move. Zarin was fast, but Ronan was faster. The human champion used his agility to his advantage, ducking and weaving as the alien's claws slashed through the air. Each time, Ronan was one step ahead, his movements precise and calculated. The suit of armor responded to his every command, shifting its weight and balance as he moved, like an extension of his own body. Princess Arlena watched with growing interest from the royal box. She had expected Ronan to struggle. After all, no human could possibly match the raw power of a creature like Zarin. But she hadn't expected this. The human's movements were sharp and precise. He wasn't relying on brute force. He was using strategy, outthinking his opponent at every turn. Zarin grew frustrated. The alien's roars of anger echoed through the arena as he swung his claws again and again, trying to land a hit. But each time, Ronan was there, sidestepping or blocking with a well-placed strike of his own. The human was tiring him out, and the crowd began to murmur, sensing that something was happening, something they hadn't expected. Finally, after a particularly wild swing, Zarin left himself open. Ronan didn't hesitate. With lightning speed, he lunged forward, using the momentum of his armor to deliver a swift kick to Zarin's midsection. The alien stumbled back, surprised by the force of the blow. Ronan didn't give him a chance to recover. He followed up with a quick series of punches and kicks, each one landing with precision. Zarin was now on the defensive, his once confident movements turning into desperate swings. Ronan took advantage of the opening. With a powerful twist of his body, he brought his fist down onto Zarin's shoulder, forcing the alien to the ground with a thud. The crowd went silent. It was over. Zarin groaned as he tried to rise, but Ronan was already standing over him, his chest heaving with the exertion of the fight. "Not bad for a human," Ronan said, his voice low but steady. The alien's eyes filled with disbelief as he realized he had been outclassed. With one final push, Ronan shoved him to the ground, signaling his victory. The crowd erupted into applause, but Ronan didn't hear them. His focus remained on the princess. She had been watching every move, every strike, and now she was silent. Ronan could see her eyes narrow as she tried to hide her surprise. The fight was over. But for Ronan, this was only the beginning. He had won his first battle, but the real challenge was still to come. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for humanity's place in the stars. And now, Sarlena's opinion of him had begun to shift. She had seen what humans were capable of, and it was only a matter of time before she saw even more. Ronan sat alone in his quarters, the cool glow of Talaron's twin moons filtering through the windows. He hadn't won the fight for personal glory. He had fought for something much bigger. But the arena was still alive in his mind, the echoes of the crowd's roar ringing in his ears. The victory over Zarin had been satisfying, yes, but it hadn't earned him respect, not from the princess, and certainly not from the Typhar people. He stood up and walked toward the small desk at the far side of the room. The dim light revealed a few personal items, a picture of Earth's blue oceans, a memento from his first mission, and the thin, worn-out letter from his parents, sent before he left Earth. These were reminders of home. Humanity's strength didn't just come from their weapons, Ronan knew. It was in their hearts, their willingness to rise when the odds were impossible. But he couldn't fight like that in the arena. The crowd didn't care about heart or strategy. They cared about strength. And even if Ronan could defeat every opponent with his tactics and his armor, he wouldn't win their respect until he proved that humans had the strength to stand tall without it. He sighed deeply. This wasn't the way to prove humanity's worth. What was it that Sarlena had said about his armor? That he was nothing without it. She was right, in a way. His suit could make him strong, but it was also a crutch, a way to hide his weaknesses. He couldn't fight the rest of the tournament this way. Not if he truly wanted to prove that humans weren't dependent on technology to survive. Ronan's thoughts shifted to Princess Arlena. She had been watching him closely, judging him with every step. The way she had scoffed at him in the arena. The way her gaze had flickered with amusement. It had all been a challenge. Her belief that her species was superior had been obvious, but something had shifted during the fight. He could see it in her eyes after he defeated Zarin. There was respect, just a little. Maybe she was starting to understand that humans weren't just tech-wielding weaklings. But that respect wouldn't come easily. He had to do something bold, something that would prove once and for all that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Ronan's eyes fell on the edge of his armor. The plates that had protected him so far. They were sturdy and advanced, everything Earth could offer. But they were also the reason the Sci-Fi people didn't take him seriously. They saw the armor, not the man inside it. An idea began to form, one that made his heart race with both excitement and fear. What if he fought without it? What if, instead of hiding behind technology, he faced his next opponent as a human, weak, vulnerable, and yet stronger for it? The thought scared him. He knew the risks, but this was the only way to prove the point. The only way to show that humans could overcome any obstacle, not because of their technology, but because of their will. Ronan knew the next fight was going to be harder. The tournament was about to reach its peak, and the enemies were only going to get more dangerous. But if he could face his next challenge without his armor, if he could stand tall in the face of impossible odds, then maybe, just maybe, he could win the respect he was seeking. Not just from the princess, but from everyone watching. He looked back at the picture of Earth, his home. Then, with a deep breath, he made his decision. The armor would come off. The true test was about to begin. The next day, the tension in the air was thick with anticipation. The grand arena of Talaran buzzed with excitement as spectators from all corners of the galaxy gathered to watch the next round of the tournament. Ronan stood in the preparation chamber, his heart beating in rhythm with the heavy hum of the crowd. He could hear their voices, alien languages swirling around, shouting, laughing, waiting. This time, there was no armor, no protection. Just him, his strength, and his wits. He had made his decision, and now, there was no turning back. The arena gates opened, and Ronan stepped out into the blinding light. His bare arms and legs felt exposed, vulnerable. Without the thick layers of his suit, he could feel the weight of the air, the burn of the sun on his skin. Every muscle in his body was alive with energy. It was a strange feeling, different from the calculated safety he felt with the armor. Now, it was just him, the true test of his worth. The crowd fell silent as Ronan stepped into the middle of the arena, his gaze meeting Princess Sarlina's. She was standing in the royal box above the arena, her piercing eyes locked on him. There was no expression on her face, just the same distant, confident air she always carried. She had no idea what he was planning. She still thought of him as weak, a human who relied on technology to fight. Her gaze faltered for just a split second when she saw that Ronan was unarmed and unprotected, standing in the open like a target. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. The silence stretched on as the tension between them grew. This wasn't just about the fight. It was about proving something to her, to the Sci-Fi Empire, and to himself. From across the arena, Ronan's next opponent emerged. The alien warrior was a woman, tall and powerful, with long, sweeping tentacles that could lash out like whips. Her skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, and her eyes glowed with a strange, unnerving light. She was known as Kara the Shatterer, a brutal force in combat, capable of disarming her foes with a single strike. As she stepped forward, Kara's eyes flicked over Ronan, and a smirk spread across her face. She was used to overwhelming her enemies with sheer power, and the fact that Ronan was standing before her, with no armor, only made her more confident. "Are you ready to die, human?" Kara's voice echoed through the arena, and the crowd murmured in agreement. To them, Ronan was already a lost cause. But Ronan didn't answer. Instead, he settled into his stance, his mind clearing of all distractions. He didn't need to speak, he just needed to act. The moment the gong sounded, Kara lunged forward, her tentacles slashing through the air like whips. Ronan was quick, moving to the side just as one of the tentacles whipped past him, narrowly missing his shoulder. The crowd gasped in surprise as he dodged, his movements swift and precise. He had no armor, no weapons, but he had something else, his speed and his instincts. Kara lashed out again, this time trying to entangle Ronan with one of her tentacles. But Ronan ducked and rolled, coming up behind her in an instant. With a quick strike, he punched her in the side, causing her to stumble. It wasn't enough to knock her down, but it was enough to prove that he wasn't just relying on luck. The crowd was starting to murmur again. Ronan wasn't a typical human. He wasn't weak. He wasn't relying on his armor to protect him. He was fighting with everything he had, his mind working quickly, his body moving like a machine. Kara, however, was enraged. She spun around with a roar, her tentacles moving faster than before. Ronan dodged again, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Every muscle in his body screamed with the effort, but he kept moving, kept outsmarting her. Princess Sarlina watched with a mixture of confusion and growing admiration. She had seen strength before, but never like this. Ronan wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting to prove something. Something bigger than himself. The fight wasn't over yet, but Ronan's message had already begun to sink in. Humans weren't just creatures of technology. They were survivors, driven by something deeper. Something that no alien race could understand unless they truly saw it with their own eyes. And Sarlina, she was starting to understand. Ronan stood in the center of the arena, sweat dripping down his face, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Kara the Shatterer lay at his feet, defeated but still breathing. The crowd had fallen silent once again, and Ronan could feel their eyes on him. Some still filled with doubt, others with admiration. The fight had been brutal, more difficult than any battle he had ever fought before, but he had done it. He had beaten an opponent who seemed nearly invincible, all with his own strength and will. As Ronan caught his breath, he looked up at the royal box. Princess Sarlina was there, standing motionless, her eyes locked on him. Her expression was unreadable, but Ronan could sense that something had shifted. She had watched the fight with intensity, never breaking her gaze from him. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Ronan could see a flicker of something, respect, curiosity. It was hard to say, but it was enough to make him feel like he had finally made a dent in her confidence. Ronan didn't smile. He wasn't done yet. He had made his point, but there was still more to prove. He could feel the weight of the galaxy's eyes on him, watching every move. He couldn't afford to stop now. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for humanity's place in the stars. As the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, signaling the end of the match, Ronan turned to walk off the battlefield. But before he could reach the exit, a figure stepped into his path. It was Princess Sarlina herself. The alien princess moved with grace, her footsteps soft but purposeful. She descended from her royal perch, her eyes never leaving Ronan as she approached. The crowd hushed, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Sarlina was the last person Ronan had expected to speak with, not after the way she had taunted him before. But now, as she stood before him, there was no mockery in her gaze, only something far more dangerous: curiosity. "You fought well," she said, her voice low, but clear. Her words were carefully chosen, almost too carefully. It was as if she was still measuring him, still trying to understand what had just happened. "You are not what I expected." Ronan raised an eyebrow, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I'm glad I could surprise you." For a moment, there was a silence between them. Sarlina's gaze softened, but only just. "I assumed you were just another human, relying on technology. I was wrong." Ronan could hear the honesty in her voice, but there was something more beneath it. It wasn't just about his fighting ability anymore. It was about something deeper. The way she looked at him now was different from the arrogance she had shown at the start. She wasn't seeing him as an inferior being anymore. She was seeing him for what he truly was, a force to be reckoned with. "You think I've just been hiding behind my armor, don't you?" Ronan asked, taking a step closer. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. But it's not the armor that makes me strong. It's my mind. It's my will. It's what makes humanity different from the rest of the galaxy. Sarlina tilted her head slightly, her sharp eyes studying him. What makes you different? Ronan paused, looking directly into her eyes. We fight for more than just survival. We fight for something bigger. We fight for each other, and we don't give up, no matter the odds. There was a moment of silence as Sarlina absorbed his words. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. I see. Her voice was soft, almost thoughtful. Perhaps there is more to humans than I realized. Ronan stood tall, knowing that this was a turning point. The princess was no longer mocking him. She was seeing humanity through his eyes, understanding that their strength didn't come from their technology, but from something far more powerful, their hearts. But there was still more to come. The tournament wasn't over yet, and the hardest challenges were still ahead. However, for the first time since arriving on Talaran, Ronan felt like the tides were beginning to turn in his favor. And as for Sarlina, maybe, just maybe, she would learn that humans were not to be underestimated. The princess turned to leave, her figure already disappearing into the shadows. But Ronan knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. The real battle was just beginning. The tournament on Talaran had reached its most intense phase, and the arena was buzzing with excitement. Ronan could feel the heat of the crowd pressing in on him as he stood in the center of the ring, staring down at his next opponent. The air seemed to hum with electricity. This was no ordinary battle. This was the final test, the ultimate trial, where warriors from across the galaxy fought for glory and power. Ronan had already proven himself in the previous matches. He had faced skilled fighters and powerful creatures, each one stronger than the last. And each time, he had stood his ground, relying not just on his strength, but on his quick thinking and determination. But now, facing his final opponent, Ronan could sense that this fight would be different. This wasn't just about physical strength. This was a fight for his very survival. Across from him stood Graxer the Destroyer, a monstrous being whose reputation alone had sent chills down Ronan's spine. Graxer was a creature from an ancient warlord race, his massive body covered in thick, scarred armor. His eyes were a glowing fiery red, and his body radiated power. Graxer's strength was legendary, and he was known for his ruthless nature in combat. The crowd roared as he stepped forward, towering over Ronan like a mountain. Ronan's heart pounded in his chest. He had faced strong opponents before, but Graxer was a different beast entirely. This wasn't just a warrior. This was a living weapon, a force of destruction. The gong sounded, and the fight began. Graxer didn't waste any time. With a roar, he lunged forward, his huge fists swinging with terrifying force. Ronan barely had time to react as the first punch came crashing toward him. He dove to the side, the blow missing him by inches, but the shockwave from Graxer's strike sent a gust of air that nearly knocked him off his feet. Ronan's mind raced. He had no armor, no gadgets, nothing to protect him except his skills and instincts. Graxer was faster than he expected, and each swing of the massive creature's fists was like the force of a crashing meteor. The alien was relentless, his every movement calculated to end the fight in a single blow. But Ronan was no rookie. He had fought in countless battles, and he knew how to read his opponents. He could see Graxer's movements before they happened, and that gave him an edge. As Graxer swung again, Ronan ducked, using the momentum to dart in close. He aimed a quick jab to Graxer's side, but the punch barely seemed to faze the giant. Graxer bellowed in anger and swung his massive arm again, knocking Ronan to the ground. The impact was like a freight train hitting him, and for a moment, the world spun around him. Pain exploded in his chest, but he gritted his teeth and pushed himself up. He had been hit before, harder even, but this was different. He could feel the strength of Graxer's blows rattling his bones, testing his limits. As the fight continued, Ronan's body began to ache. His muscles were tired, his breath shallow. But there was no room for weakness. Not now. This was the moment he had been preparing for his entire life. He couldn't give up. Not for himself. Not for Earth. He needed a plan. A strategy. He couldn't fight Graxer head-on. His strength was too much. But Ronan had something that Graxer didn't: speed. And the ability to adapt. The human mind was capable of incredible things when it was pushed to its limits. As Graxer raised his fist for another crushing blow, Ronan saw his opening. He ducked beneath the punch, then rolled behind Graxer's massive back. Before the creature could react, Ronan launched himself forward, grabbing hold of Graxer's massive arm and using his own momentum to swing around and lash onto the back of the beast's neck. Graxer roared in fury, twisting to throw him off, but Ronan held on tightly, his grip strong. This was it. This was his chance. With a sharp twist, he aimed for Graxer's weak spot, just below the back of the neck where the armor didn't cover. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Ronan, with all his remaining strength, drove his elbow into the vulnerable spot. Graxer let out a guttural cry of pain and collapsed to the ground with a deafening crash. For a moment, there was nothing but silence in the arena. Then the crowd erupted into cheers, their voices filling the vast space. Ronan, panting and covered in sweat, stood over the fallen beast, his chest heaving. He had done it. He had defeated Graxer the Destroyer. The arena erupted into applause, but Ronan barely heard it. His legs felt like jelly, and his body screamed in protest. But he didn't care. He had won. And now, there was only one person left to face, the one who had been watching every move, every strike. Princess Tarlina. Ronan turned toward the royal box, his eyes locking with hers. The princess was standing, her expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes. The crowd was still roaring with excitement as Ronan stood over the fallen Graxer. His chest heaved with each breath, his muscles sore and aching from the brutal fight. He had faced the might of one of the strongest creatures in the galaxy and come out victorious. But even as the cheers echoed through the arena, Ronan knew that the hardest part was yet to come. He turned slowly, his gaze moving toward the royal box where Princess Arlena stood, her expression still unreadable. She had been watching every fight closely, her sharp eyes taking in every move, every strike. Now, as the cheers of the crowd began to fade, it was her turn to watch him. Ronan's eyes narrowed slightly. He had come to Talaran to prove something, not just to the Typhar Empire, but to Sarlina herself. The princess who had once scoffed at his armor and dismissed him as weak, now stood before him, no doubt questioning everything she thought she knew about humanity. His armor, the very thing that had protected him through every battle, now felt like a burden. It had served its purpose, but Ronan knew that to truly prove himself, he had to do something no one expected. He had to show that he could face the next fight. Without it, as he walked toward the center of the arena, he could feel the weight of the moment. The arena was still, the air thick with anticipation. The crowd, which had been cheering for him moments ago, now seemed to hold its breath. He reached the center and paused. Without a word, Ronan began to unfasten the straps of his armor. Piece by piece, the advanced technology that had kept him safe in every fight, that had given him the strength and protection of Earth's finest weapons, was removed. The sound of the armor hitting the ground was like a final, thunderous echo in the arena. The crowd was silent, watching in disbelief as Ronan stood there, now vulnerable, his body exposed. No more protection, no more armor, just a human, standing alone in the vast arena. Princess Arlena's eyes narrowed as she watched him. She had expected Ronan to rely on his armor to the very end. But here he was, showing the galaxy that it wasn't his technology that made him strong. It was his resolve, his spirit, the very thing that had driven humanity to rise from the ashes time and time again. Ronan looked up at Sarlina, his eyes locking with hers. For the first time, He didn't look like a warrior in a suit of armor. He looked like a man, human, flawed, and yet capable of greatness. "I don't need this armor," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "I never did." Sarlina didn't answer at first. Her gaze flickered for a moment, as if she were processing something deep inside. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, descending from her royal box and walking toward the arena floor. Her eyes never left Ronan's, her face still a mask of carefully controlled emotions. "Why?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "Why would you do this? Why fight without your armor?" Ronan met her gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "Because strength isn't about hiding behind something. It's about standing tall, even when you're exposed, even when you're vulnerable. That's what makes humanity different. We don't need protection to fight. We fight because we have to." Sarlina's lips parted slightly as if she were about to respond, but for a long moment she said nothing. She was studying him, her mind working through everything she had just seen. She had watched Ronan fight, had seen the human willpower in action, and now she was witnessing it again in the most unexpected way. Ronan wasn't like the other warriors. He didn't need the armor to fight. He had something much more powerful: his heart, his determination. For the first time, Sarlina realized that she had been wrong. She had underestimated humanity. She had thought they were weak, dependent on technology, but Ronan had just shown her the truth. Humanity was capable of surviving, of thriving, without the tools and weapons that other races relied on. There was a shift in the air, something unspoken between them. Sarlina didn't say anything more, but her eyes softened, just slightly. Ronan could see it now. She understood. As the silence stretched between them, Ronan felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He had done it. He had proven his point. No matter what happened next, no matter how the tournament ended, he had shown them all what it meant to be human, and that, in the end, was all he needed to do. The air in the arena was thick with anticipation. The silence that followed Ronan's bold decision to remove his armor seemed to stretch forever, each second hanging like an eternity. Even the once enthusiastic crowd was caught in a moment of disbelief. They had expected him to collapse under the weight of his vulnerability, to retreat into the safety of his technological advantage. But here he was, standing tall, unprotected, a human facing down the fiercest challenges the galaxy had to offer. Princess Sarlina, standing off to the side, her arms folded across her chest, studied him with a mix of curiosity and respect. She had thought him arrogant, reliant on tools and tricks to win his battles. But now, in the middle of the arena, Ronan had shown her something different, something raw and powerful. And for the first time since their meeting, Sarlina found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about humans. Ronan's next opponent was announced. Thraxar, the Beast of the North, a creature that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Thraxar was a towering, hulking monster, covered in spikes and scales. His roar echoed throughout the arena, making the ground shake beneath Ronan's feet. He had never seen anything like it. The creature's breath was hot and smelled of sulfur. Its eyes burned with a terrifying intelligence, and its claws could tear through metal like paper. The crowd cheered, eager to see what would happen next. Everyone expected Ronan to fail. Thraxar was a creature of legend, a monster too strong for any being to face. But as the monster stepped forward, Ronan's gaze never wavered. There was fear in his chest, yes, but there was also something else: determination. He had fought through every challenge, faced every obstacle, and now he would face the final trial. The gong sounded, and the fight began. Thraxar moved with incredible speed for such a large creature, charging toward Ronan with a growl that sent a shiver down his spine. Ronan barely had time to react as the beast swung its clawed fist at him. He ducked, rolling to the side just in time to avoid the massive swipe. Thraxar's roar filled the arena as the beast turned to attack again. Ronan's mind raced. He didn't have his armor, and every step he took had to be calculated. The power of his body was not enough to overpower the creature's sheer size. He had to outthink it. He darted to the side, using the environment to his advantage, leading Thraxar into the arena's pillars. As the creature lunged toward him again, Ronan quickly scrambled up one of the pillars, just out of Thraxar's reach. He could feel the heat of the beast's breath as it swiped at him, its claws grazing the edge of the stone. Ronan didn't hesitate. With a burst of speed, he launched himself off the pillar, landing behind the creature. Before Thraxar could react, Ronan struck, quick, precise, targeting the soft spot beneath the beast's armor. Thraxar roared in pain, stumbling backward. It was a small victory, but it was enough to shift the fight in Ronan's favor. He wasn't overpowering the beast with strength, but he was outsmarting it. His mind was faster than Thraxar's brute force, and that made all the difference. The creature turned, its eyes filled with fury as it lunged once more. Ronan dodged again, rolling underneath the massive beast and coming up on its other side. This time, he aimed lower, striking at the joint where the creature's armor was weakest. Thraxar's roar of pain was deafening as the monster finally collapsed, its massive body crashing to the ground with a thud that shook the arena. The crowd was silent for a moment, and then, as one, they erupted into wild applause. They had witnessed the impossible. Ronan, a human, had just defeated a creature that no one thought could be beaten. Ronan stood over the fallen Thraxar, his breathing heavy, his body sore, but there was no time to rest. He had won, yes, but this victory was not just about surviving the fight. It was about proving something much bigger. Princess Arlena, who had been watching from the royal box, stood in stunned silence. Her gaze was fixed on Ronan, and for the first time since their first meeting, she truly saw him, not as a man relying on technology, but as a warrior who had triumphed against all odds. Ronan had done it. He had shown her, and the entire galaxy, what humanity was capable of. His strength came not from armor or weapons, but from something deeper, something that no alien race could replicate. Ronan looked up at Sarlena, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, powerful moment. He didn't need to say anything. The respect was there, silent but undeniable. The fight was over. But the real battle, the one for humanity's place among the stars, had only just begun. The arena had fallen silent after Ronan's victory. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, was slowly beginning to understand what they had just witnessed. Ronan, a human, had defeated Thraxar, a beast so fierce that many had believed no one could challenge it. But Ronan hadn't just survived. He had outsmarted it, beaten it with his speed, strategy, and heart. The whole arena seemed to hold its breath, watching him as he stood tall over the fallen creature. Ronan's body ached with every movement, his muscles sore and tired, but there was a strange sense of peace that settled over him. He had proven something, not just to the galaxy, but to himself. He had shown that humanity could stand on its own, without relying on the weapons and armor others believed they needed. And now, there was one last person to face, Princess Arlena. Ronan wiped the sweat from his forehead, his chest still heaving from the intense fight. He didn't turn to look at the royal box where Sarlena had been watching. He didn't need to. He could feel her gaze on him, heavy and filled with thought. He took a step toward the exit, but then he heard her voice. "You've done it," she said, her tone low, almost hesitant. Ronan stopped, turning slowly. Sarlena was stepping down from her royal box, her eyes fixed on him. For the first time since he had arrived on Talaran, there was no arrogance in her expression, no smugness, no superiority. Instead, there was something else, something new. Respect. Ronan's heart raced. This wasn't just any moment. This was the moment he had been waiting for since the very first time he had set foot on Talaran. When he had entered the arena, he had done it to prove that humans were more than just a weak, primitive species. He had fought to show the galaxy that there was something inside them that no one else had. And now, Sarlina, the princess who had mocked him and dismissed him, was standing before him with a different look in her eyes. I was wrong. Sarlina continued, her voice softer now. I thought your people were nothing but frail, relying on technology to survive. I thought that the only reason you were here was because of your armor. Ronan didn't say anything, but he could feel the weight of her words. This was the change he had hoped for. Not just victory in the tournament, but a change in perception, a shift in how the galaxy saw humanity. Sarlina took a step closer, her eyes searching his. But you've shown me something else, she admitted. You fought with your mind, with your heart. It wasn't the armor that made you strong. It was you. Ronan nodded, his voice steady. It's always been about what's inside, not what's on the outside. Humans don't need technology to survive. We survive because we never give up. We fight for each other. And when things get tough, we dig deeper than anyone else. Sarlina fell silent, her gaze softening as she took in his words. Ronan could see that she was thinking, processing everything that had happened. The princess, who had once seen humans as weak, was now standing before him, her perspective changed forever. He had done more than fight in the tournament. He had challenged everything she believed about humanity. The silence between them stretched on, and for the first time, Sarlina looked vulnerable. The walls that she had built around herself seemed to crack, just a little. She wasn't a princess anymore. She was just a person, standing before a man who had shown her the true meaning of strength. I never understood, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But now, I think I do. Ronan met her gaze, his expression calm but firm. He had earned her respect, but more importantly, he had earned her understanding. Maybe you can help others understand too, Ronan said. Not just about us, but about what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. To stand up, even when the odds are stacked against you. Sarlina nodded slowly, a faint smile appearing on her lips. There was no arrogance in her eyes now, only recognition. I will, she said softly. I will make sure the galaxy sees humanity for what it truly is. Ronan felt a sense of pride fill his chest, but there was no time to rest. The tournament was over, but the future was just beginning. He had made his mark, not just on Talaran, but on the whole galaxy. Humanity's place was secured, not because of their technology, but because of their heart. And as he walked away from the arena, he knew that this was only the beginning. Sarlina's words echoed in his mind. I will make sure the galaxy sees humanity for what it truly is. It was a victory, but the real work was only just starting. Ronan had proved that humanity's strength didn't come from what they wore, but from who they were. And now, the galaxy would never forget it. The final ceremony of the tournament was held in the Grand Hall of Talaran, a massive structure filled with alien dignitaries and warriors from across the galaxy. The room buzzed with excitement, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something different. Ronan could feel it as he stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by officials and fighters from every race, species, and culture. He had done what no one thought possible. He had proven that humans were more than just a species that relied on technology to survive. He had shown that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons, but in their hearts and minds. Princess Sarlina, now standing beside him, was a symbol of that change. The once proud alien who had mocked him for his reliance on armor was now looking at him with respect and admiration. Her eyes held a quiet understanding that spoke louder than any words ever could. The tournament was over, but the lasting impact of what Ronan had achieved was only beginning to take shape. As the ceremony continued, Ronan couldn't help but glance toward the royal balcony, where Sarlina had stood earlier, looking down on him as if he were nothing more than a curiosity. Now she was standing beside him, her posture no longer filled with superiority, but with something that resembled partnership. The transformation was subtle, but it was there, and it was undeniable. Sarlina had proven that she could change her mind, but Ronan knew that real change was never easy. It would take time for the rest of the galaxy to shift their perceptions of humanity. The belief that Earth was full of weak, dependent people wasn't something that could be erased in a day. But Ronan was hopeful. He had fought for this, not just for his survival, but for the future of humanity. As the final speeches were made and the awards handed out, Ronan stepped back, letting the moment sink in. The cheers of the crowd felt distant now, almost unimportant. What mattered wasn't the applause. What mattered was the quiet, powerful shift in the galaxy's view of humanity. Ronan had come to Talaran as Earth's representative, an ambassador of sorts. But what he had left behind was something much bigger. He had shown the galaxy that humans weren't to be underestimated. That when pushed to the brink, humanity would rise, not just to fight, but to win with ingenuity, spirit, and heart. The same qualities that had allowed humans to survive on their homeworld for centuries would carry them forward in the galaxy. The battle for respect was far from over, but Ronan had made the first real step. Sarlin had turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You did more than win a tournament," she said quietly, her voice soft but full of meaning. "You've shown the galaxy what it truly means to be human." Ronan nodded, his gaze steady. "And you've shown me that no one is beyond change." Sarlina's lips curled into a small, sincere smile. "Maybe we've all underestimated each other," she said, her voice tinged with something akin to hope. "Perhaps it's time for the galaxy to learn what we're really capable of." Ronan's heart swelled with pride. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since he'd arrived on Talaran, he felt confident. Humanity's place in the stars was secure. It would be a long road, filled with challenges and battles of all kinds, but they would face it together, humans and aliens alike. The ceremony ended, and as Ronan left the hall, he couldn't help but look up at the vast sky above. The stars, once distant and mysterious, now felt a little closer. Earth's future in the galaxy was just beginning, and he would be there to ensure that humanity's strength, its true strength, was never forgotten. And for the first time, Ronan allowed himself a moment of hope.